Hello, my lovelies. We're gonna sip on some Dr. Pepper and vodka while we chat about this. Over the past few years, there have been a lot of big conversations online regarding the overconsumption of books and how that overconsumption relates to the performance of reading. And there are a lot of claims from various accounts and comments that creators collect books for the sake of aesthetics more than to actually read. Additionally, this can create a keeping up with the influencers sort of environment in which followers feel pressured to buy at a rate outside of their means. And with how expensive books have become, that is no small thing. A weekly book haul of dozens of titles is very inaccessible to the average working person. And creating content that normalizes that degree of consumption, many say, is a harmful expectation bordering on wastefulness and deceit. I'm not here to necessarily attempt to contradict those claims that people who do consume at an inaccessible rate exist. I'm sure there certainly are creators who fill a book wall for purely aesthetic reasons. And I'm sure there certainly are followers who feel as though they have to do the same in order to follow some kind of trend. What I am aiming to do in this video is break down what I am calling my personal bookonomics. I want to find out what books I have, how I got them, and what they cost me financially. Before we dive in, please consider supporting my channel by hitting that subscribe button. And throughout this video, please feel free to ask any questions at all in the comments about my book collecting, my library, whatever you like. A few things before we get started. This project will not include my husband's books. It will not include my kiddos' books. I am only talking about mine. Ebooks, I have read plenty, and they are most certainly part of my annual reading, but they will be assessed separately toward the end of this video because number one, pricing is very different, and number two, I can confidently say that most of those were free, either via NetGalley as digital advanced readers copies or via library borrowing mostly through Libby. I am sure, however, that quite a few were purchased, and I do want to assess that. Speaking of Libby, I absolutely count audiobooks. But that was an easy thing for me to assess quickly and decide not to include as a separate section of this video because I have not purchased any. Every audiobook I listened to in 2025 was via the Libby app. Every single one. I did begin listening to audiobooks on Spotify in January, so if I do this again for my 2026 reading, I will probably include my Spotify subscription cost in my total, but that didn't happen in 2025. My audiobooks were only borrowed through Libby. I do not use Audible. I do not use Kindle Unlimited, and I haven't for some time. My e-reader is a 4-year-old Kindle, and while I intend to exhaust its usefulness before I seek out any kind of replacement, any future e-reader of mine will likely be a Kobo or another non-Amazon brand. I once owned a Nook, and I made that thing limp along for almost 10 years before I got the Kindle. Now, I have purchased ebooks on Amazon, but generally speaking, I really try to avoid doing that. Bookshop.org offering ebooks was a big, happy day for me. Again, I plan to ensure that this lives as full a life as I can pull out of it before I spend the money on a different e-reader, and most of what I read on here is via NetGalley and Libby. More on that toward the end of the video when we dive into ebooks. What I'd also like to do is go through my bank statements for 2025 and determine how much money I spent in total at bookshops. Now, this will include books I bought for others, and certainly some non-book items, and it does not include anything purchased with store credit or with gift cards. But for the sake of keeping me honest about how many of my own dollars contribute to yearly bookstore spending, this is something I want to take a closer look at. I've also begun keeping a record for this year, 2026, which includes all of my book purchases, so that I will have more detailed information when I look back next year. So really, I have two main goals. Find out how much money I spent at bookstores in a single year, and determine how much of my personal library was purchased by me. Step one, I'm going to spend the next several days cataloging my collection, carefully logging every single physical copy I own. I have this fun little barcode scanner. It was a Christmas gift from my lovely husband. I have also begun a Libib account, and this will scan every barcode so that each title goes into a spreadsheet alongside its publication information. As I do this, I will also be keeping a running tally, which brings me to step two. This will involve going back through that spreadsheet and adding the following categories. Number one, purchased at either full or sale price. Number two, purchased secondhand. Number three, subscriptions. Number four, gifted by friends or family. And number five, gifted by publishers/ARCs. Step two will rely primarily on my memory. I'm just going to have to dig deep and trust that I remember correctly. For step three, I will take all of this data and I will graph it. I plan to generate a handy pie chart that will act as a visual representation of what percentages of the books I own fall into each of those categories. Once I am through with all of that, I will go ahead and assess my digital library in much the same way. My digital library is not insignificant, but I probably will get through that a little quicker, as the only categories I'm looking to apply here are purchased and free/borrowed. Finally, for step four, I will go through every single one of my bank statements for 2025. I have one debit card and 3 credit cards. That's 4 cards times 12 months for 48 statements. I will include every purchase I can find that was made at a bookstore, and then I will present the total dollar amount. If I am able, I will also make an additional pie chart that breaks down secondhand shops, online purchases, independent bookstore purchases, subscriptions, and major retailers. Again, I do have plans to parse all of that out into more accurate categories for 2026, which will include store credit, gift cards, and what was purchased during each visit, divided into book and non-book items. But I didn't think to do that last year. So this is all archaeology. We're excavating my year in books. One last thing before we kick this off. These most certainly did not all come to me in a single year. Some of these books I have had since childhood. Some are from college, and in fact, a few were required reading for my coursework. Yet more were left to me when relatives passed. Several are souvenirs from my travels. I will freely admit that my book collecting kind of exploded in COVID, but I have never not had books. And it was always an ambition of mine to keep a robust personal library. So please, I beg of you, do not misinterpret this as all of the books that came my way just in 2025. That is not how this happened. This has taken many years to cultivate, and it is very much an ongoing process. I do also rotate through titles somewhat regularly. If I didn't enjoy a book, there's no point in me keeping it. You get the idea. We're going to try our best to be circumspect in these comments, okay? But let's get into it with step 1, scanning these babies into Libib. Cue the voiceover.
This whole process took about as long as I expected it to, even with the learning curve. I was planning on devoting a couple of days to the endeavor, but I really only made it a few hours on day 1 before taking a long pause. But I did get back to it. I spent a long time not only scanning each title, but also racking my brain for where said book came from. And here's a fun plot twist: not all of the books scanned. I probably should have expected that because I definitely have a few books that are very old and therefore have no barcode. Some that absolutely did have barcodes still did not scan, either because they are, again, fairly old, or because the database Libib pulls from just didn't include the ISBN. I did worry for a moment that Libib would not accept barcodes from countries other than the United States. I do own quite a few books from the UK, as well as a couple from Italy, but those all scanned fine. A handful of advanced reader copies, on the other hand, didn't scan, and I couldn't add them manually because they haven't been published yet, so while they aren't in my Libib library, I did go ahead and add them to the tally of gifted books. I didn't have too many duplicates because I generally don't keep multiple copies of the same book. The notable exceptions to this rule are Dracula, Frankenstein, and Ariel by Sylvia Plath. One copy of Ariel was old and had no barcode, and one copy of Dracula is an edition that wasn't in Libib's database, but don't worry, they were all allocated eventually and added into my gifted versus paid for tally.
Cataloging all of this before I do a massive unhauling was poor decision making on my part.
As you can see, the vast majority of my books live on this large wall, but there are some others tucked away in the china cabinet. I scanned every single one of them as well, and yes, this is where the very, very old copies are kept, so that was an added step.
As I started scanning, I estimated that I owned roughly 600 books total. The actual number of physical books is 670. Not horribly far off. Now in step 2, we're going to pull all of this off of Libib and into a Google Sheet. Check everything against my many tally marks, and double check that everything is categorized appropriately. Stand by. You go to Settings, Export Collection Data, and voila! A spreadsheet. Wait. Individual spreadsheets per collection. And I've done my collections all by genre. This may take me a minute, but I can do it. Okay, all pulled into one Google Sheet. Success.
Through the magic of editing, I'm gonna try and make this look a lot prettier. That's better, much better. I like color-coded things.
Now comes the arduous task of those 5 categories we talked about earlier. Purchased at full or sale price, purchased secondhand, subscriptions, gifted by friends and family, and gifted by publishers and ARCs. As I have no interest whatsoever in typing those things out 700 times, we're gonna make a handy little drop-down menu and stick that into a column. Huzzah. Stand by while I pick from a drop-down menu 700 times.
And this is the part that took way less time than I thought it would, lots of checking back and forth, and I discovered a few missing from the database, so the actual total of physical books is 675.
So step 3 involves a little Google Sheet magic, and ta-da! Here's pie chart number 1. I'm not sure I had any particular predictions regarding how many were bought versus how many weren't, but this all feels pretty accurate. Again, I've relied totally on my memory, so I do allow for a reasonable margin of error. Let's say up to a 10% difference in any direction, which is about 7 books. I think I'm within a fairly acceptable range, though.
Digging into this a little further, if I add up subscriptions plus the fuller sale price plus secondhand, then I've got 78.8% of my library that was purchased by me. 78.8% of 675 books is, let's go ahead and say 532 books that I would have bought. This is, again, a total estimate, but given that some full price books I would have bought are closer to $30, but given some secondhand books I would have bought are like maybe 50 cents, we'll go ahead and say $15 per book. Oh my God. Okay, so nearly $8,000 I would have spent total over the lifetime of my library.
Now for my digital copies. This shouldn't take long at all though, and we're only doing paid versus free. So all I'm doing here is making tally marks for each and then doing some quick math. Okay, 160 total ebooks on my Kindle. 101 were purchased while 59 were free, which shakes out to about 63-37 percentage-wise. Not bad at all. I am, however, going to hold to my earlier comment that most of what I read on my Kindle is free because obviously the library books do get returned and they don't stay on my Kindle. So in spite of the fact that the 101 number is higher than the 59 number, there are definitely more than 100 that have cycled through the library borrowing process. Let's say all of those purchased ebooks were anywhere between $3 and $7. So if 5 is the average, that's a rough estimate of $500 worth of ebooks I would have paid for out of my own pocket. And with that, we have reached step 4, my attempt to calculate how much money I spent on books throughout all of 2025. For what I hope are obvious reasons, I'm not going to show you screenshots. One card at a time, we're starting with USAA. Actually, this one shouldn't take long. I mostly use it for subscriptions. Yeah, easy enough. Only 6 book-related purchases that whole year on this card. 7. Okay, done. By the way, I'm not just looking up the word book on each of my statements or filtering them by bookshop. I am combing through everything. Card number 2. I use this card a lot. This may take a while. Starting January. For a couple of these, some bookshops have attached cafes, for example, and you pay separately for the books versus the coffee and the pastry. So there are 2 purchases on the same day at the same retailer. It's likely that the cafe purchases are the lesser amount between the 2, so I'll go ahead and put the larger number in my spreadsheet. Oh, except Kramer's in DC. I know for a fact that the $97.49 was brunch with Rachel. So this is the rare case in which the smaller amount was the books. And I went to Kramer's more than once for sure. Oh, fuck, now we're into October. When I went to New York. But see, again, Liz's Book Bar, I paid for a glass of wine, then I bought a book. But a glass of wine in New York City is $20, and so was the paperback I bought. I'm gonna put the larger number in, but that's a total toss-up. I have no way of knowing. And that was the first purchase that processed, so it truly may have been the wine. Why did I get home from that trip and go to Barnes & Noble the next day? That had to be for Kiddo. I'm counting it though. But is that the last of it for this card? Oh no, wait, there's Books A Million. Okay, 2 cards down, 2 to go. This is oddly kind of fun for me. I'm investigating my own life. Dare I calculate what the damage is so far at the halfway point? Okay, but that's not horrible. It is more than I expected though. That's already over $100 a month. I don't love knowing that about myself. And again, some of those trips were definitely for my kiddos' books, and some involved books I purchased for others. My self-justification prowess is something. Card number 3, let's see. Starting off strong with bookshop.org. May, Riverby, $7.90. I mostly pay with store credit at Riverby, so that's interesting. Book of the month. Yes, I am including subscriptions, and that certainly counts. Anything else for the debit card? I mean, we're already into June and it's not looking too bad. I am more than likely saving the worst for last. I spoke too soon. July looks not great. See, and this is why I can't just search the word book in my statements. The Spotty Dog is a book bar in Hudson. Tails and Tales is a book cafe. The things one misses if one were to do it the easy way. We do nothing half-assed here, as evidenced by this entire endeavor. There has got to be a novel purchase or 2 on this card. Or are they all on the card I'm avoiding? Just for reference, the final credit card is my travel points card, so it gets a lot of play. That makes me sound like an asshole. This Barnes & Noble purchase, I am positive this was a latte. And one of these purchases from the Morgan would have been my ticket. The other would have been the gift shop. And I bought books at the New York Public Library for sure. But that is the last of card number 3. Now I'm afraid. It's possible though that I put less on this card than I think I did. Okay, I definitely did not overspend on this card. Not looking so bad. I was needlessly worried. Not much at all here. Yeah, I definitely psyched myself out. This is actually completely reasonable. And that's all, folks. Now for the total. Okay, in 2025, on books and other book-related purchases at various bookish establishments, I spent a total of $2,331.76. It's not egregious, but it's definitely more than I realized. And it's nearly $200 a month, which I am very lucky is within my budget, but I can definitely be more mindful of this. And what I haven't done is tracked all of the money that I earned through selling my books on sites like Pango and my store credit process with Riverbee, my local secondhand shop where I sell plenty that I need to offload. But that's, again, something that I want to be better about keeping track of in 2026. And a rough estimate of money spent in 2025 can be broken up pretty easily, and they still align with my aforementioned categories of secondhand shops, online purchases, independent bookstores, subscriptions, and major retailers. Time for some more Google Sheet magic. But before I reveal it, let me just say, my number one culprit in the major retailers game is not Barnes & Noble. It is Books A Million. We avoid Amazon at all costs. Boom. Pie chart number 2. Yeah, so my little sliver of online purchases here was bookshop.org, which technically also counts as indie. Far and away, independent shops are my biggest expense, which is great. Over $1,000 to support small businesses. That we love. Going forward into tracking all of this data for 2026, I have a clearer picture of what I want to log and the information I want to look at for the next time I do this. I only have a handful of purchases so far into the year, not nearly as many as this point last year, but all of which I'm keeping careful track of. I need to keep receipts for every book purchase I make, and I want to review them on a monthly basis. Those are my top 2 goals regarding the 2026 edition of the Bookonomics research. I also want to track how many books I specifically buy as gifts for others, how many from my library that I then sell secondhand for either cash or store credit, how many I donate or otherwise give away. I also want to keep track of what I purchase with that store credit and also with gift cards. Money that doesn't necessarily come directly out of my bank account, but is still my financial contribution to the book industry. In my monthly wrap-ups, I've already started to log what I read from my physical TBR, what has been in audiobook or ebook format, and what have been library borrows. I think that too will help give me a more thorough, comprehensive picture of my Bookonomics, so that when we do all of this over again a year from now, it will be even more exhaustively over-examined. But I hope this was fun for you to follow along. It definitely helped me. I love having this much information, and I'm looking forward to seeing if or how my habits will change now that I know all of this about myself. I have definitely already spent far less, even just this far into the year. Again, this is not intended as any kind of defense against those who say that book overconsumption has gotten out of hand. I truly do understand where those people are coming from, and I respect their perspectives. This was really an exercise to better understand where I stood with my degree of book consumption, and I learned a lot. Additionally, if this project inspires others to gain a better understanding of where they sit on that scale as well, then I'm very happy to contribute to that part of the conversation. Ultimately, I am incredibly fortunate to receive as many books as I do for free, and I am very privileged to be in a position to afford as many books as I buy, for myself and for others. My kiddo has a robust personal library, and I love encouraging that interest. I have always wanted to be in a home full of stories, and I'm so lucky that such a thing is possible for me. But I also acknowledge that this is A, not the case for everyone, B, intimidating and or unattainable for many, and C, a contribution to a capitalist machine. There is no getting away from any of those things. And I really do want to be circumspect, not only in my assessment of my collection, but about where I sit within a dialogue that challenges these behaviors. All in all, I don't consider any of the money I've spent toward books wasted. Even if I didn't enjoy the book, even if it ends up getting donated or gifted or resold, I'm more than happy to play my part within the book world. I'm eager to support authors and share their stories. I'm very proud to support independent booksellers. And while I acknowledge that the overconsumption criticism is valid, I have no remorse about my reading or my book collecting. And I don't take any personal offense from people who offer that sort of critique. I've chosen where to put my money, and I'm glad it's here. I could stand to be a bit more aware of its allocation, which was one of the chief aims of this project, but I can't say I have any regrets over the state of my library. And I'm very grateful to have more information on the topic. So what do you think? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you liked this video and want to follow along for more, please like and subscribe. If you really liked this video and want even more access to my bookish content, please check out my bindery linked below. Speaking of bindery, if you're seeing this on a Wednesday, thank you so much for being a bindery supporter. And if you're seeing this on Friday on YouTube, I hope you'll consider joining us over there too. And as always, thank you so much for watching. I'm so glad you're here.